They arrested me at 6 in the morning for stealing an app, and the app was something I had built on a folding table in my own kitchen, 2 years before I ever met the man who accused me. 19 days in a county cell, because I could not make $8,000 appear out of nowhere. And 5 months later, they dropped the charge without a word of explanation. Nobody ran that story. Everybody ran the first one. I am going to tell you how far a man falls when the people who fired him get to write the only version anyone reads, and what it ended up costing the man who wrote it. If you have ever been told to keep your head down and let the work speak for itself, stay with me a minute. That was the exact sentence my boss used the week before he had security walk me out. Before I was a developer, I was a night dispatcher at a freight yard off Route 9. Whiteboard, 4 phones, a coffee pot with a crack in the handle. There was a man named Hollis who ran the Ear E run, 61 years old, and he was getting stiffed on detention pay because nobody wrote down what time he actually backed into the dock. So I taught myself to code at that desk badly over about 14 months, and I built him a button. First month, it put $380 back in his pocket that the company would have quietly kept. He bought me a sandwich and would not let me pay for it, and that is the whole reason I kept going. By the end of that year, the thing had a name: Switchback. It handled the board, the wait times, the driver texts, all of it, and I wrote every line of it at my kitchen table on a laptop I bought used. My Uncle Walt was a machinist for 31 years, and he designed a jig that his shop is still using, and he never saw a dime of it. Put your name on it with the government, Nate, so $45, a form, and a copy of the source code, mailed off to the Copyright Office in Washington, and a certificate that came back in an envelope I stuck in a shoebox under the stairs. I thought it was a waste of $45. I thought that for 6 years. Halver Sen Logistics hired me off the yard because one of their operations guys saw Switchback running on our board and could not believe a dispatcher had made it. That is how I met Curtis Bell, me. He was the vice president of engineering. He had very good shoes, and he shook my hand with both of his. On my first day, they sat me in a conference room with a folder of paperwork an inch thick. Page 11 was the invention agreement, the one that says everything you build belongs to us. And clipped to the back of it was a blank page and called Exhibit A, where you list the things you built before you walked in the door, the things that stay yours. I wrote Switchback on that line in ballpoint, with the date, and I signed under it. Bell, me, leaned over my shoulder and read it, and said, "Good. That is the right way to do it. We are not thieves." I took a picture of that page with my phone and I sent it to my wife. June wrote back 4 words. "Look at you, Koval chick." 3 years I was happy in a way I have trouble describing now. We rebuilt Switchback properly inside Halver Sen, under a license I signed and Bell, me signed, and it went from a whiteboard replacement to the thing that ran 240 trucks. I stayed late. I fixed a tooltip at 2 in the morning once and spelled received wrong in it, R before E, and it went out that way and I left it there because it made me laugh. Ren was 5 and had just learned to type her own name, so I made it so that if you typed her name into the search field, the program came back and said, "Ren says try again." It was 6 lines of code, and it was for exactly 1 person. In February, Bell Ami started asking me to keep the newer work off the company servers. He said legal was tightening up on side projects, and it was cleaner if Switchback stayed my personal property, on my personal machine, the way we papered it on day 1. He put that in an email. He put it in 3 emails. And I thought he was protecting me. In April, he gave notice. The all hands went out on a Thursday and people cried because he was good at being liked. He told the floor he was going to go do something small and honest for a while. 2 weeks after that, on a Monday, my badge stopped working in the parking garage. They had me sit in the small conference room, the one with no window, and a lawyer from outside told me that Halver Sen had determined I had misappropriated company software for personal use. I laughed. Then a man from the security desk named Ruben came and stood in the doorway with a plastic bin for my things. And Ruben and I had eaten lunch together maybe 200 times, and he did not look at me once. They walked me the long way, past my own row, past my own screen, which still had switchback open on it, because I had been in the middle of a fix. Somebody had already put my mug in the bin. Outside, it was raining a little, and I stood in the visitor lot with a cardboard box and no idea which direction to walk. That night, the company sent a note to the whole floor about an isolated integrity incident involving a member of the engineering team. They did not use my name. They did not have to. By Wednesday, I had 41 people gone from my contacts. No message, no fight, just gone. 11 days after that, at 6 in the morning, 2 officers came to my door with a warrant because Halver Sen had referred it to the county as criminal theft of trade secrets. I asked if I could put shoes on. They said yes. Ren watched from the top of the stairs in her pajamas while a man patted down her father in the front hall, and I told her it was fine. It was a mix-up. I would be home for dinner. I was not home for dinner. Bail was $8,000, and we did not have $800, so I sat in county for 19 days. There is a version of this where I tell you jail was violent and terrifying, and it was not, and somehow that was worse. It was boring and loud, and it smelled like bleach over something else. The man on the bunk under me was in for his 3rd domestic, and when he heard what I was in, for he laughed until he had to sit up. He kept saying it. Every day, "Hey, college, you went to jail over." An app 19 days is not a long time. It is long enough for your wife to sell her car. The charge went nowhere because there was nothing in it, and the county quietly dropped it in October with a form letter that had my name misspelled. There were 400 and something search results for me, and every one of them was from the same trade site, and every one of them said arrested, and none of them said dismissed. I applied for 62 jobs. I got 2 phone screens. One recruiter called me back to say she was sorry. The background check flagged something, and she sounded like she meant it, which did not help. I took nights at a distribution center on the county line, 11 at night to 7 in the morning, unloading trailers. And I want to be clear that I was fine with that. The work was honest, and my hands were tired, and I liked the men out there. What was not fine was the Thursday a kid I had trained at Halver Sen came through on a vendor tour with a lanyard on and saw me on the dock in a safety vest and turned his whole body away. Lost the apartment in November. My sister has a basement with a laundry sink and a couch that folds out, and June set it up like it was an adventure, and Ren asked how long we were camping. I sold the bike. I sold the used laptop I had built Switchback on for $110 to a kid in a parking lot who wanted to know if it could run games. Then a Tuesday in the car, picking Ren up from school, and she was quiet the whole way. And at the light before our street, she asked me if I took something that was not mine. I said no. She said okay. And then she looked out the window, and I could not tell if she believed me. And I have never been able to ask. That is the one I still have. Not the cell, not the dock. That. Around Christmas, I stopped putting my real name on applications. My middle name is Nathan, and my mother was a Boyce. So Nathan Boyce got a help desk contract that Nate Kovalchik could not get an interview for. For 4 months, I answered to a name that was mine and also was not. And when someone called it across the room, I turned around every time. And that is when I knew something in me had come loose. I used to sit in the truck in the lot after that shift ended, engine off, and go through the arithmetic on what I was actually worth to anybody as a man versus what I was worth to them as a story. I did that math a lot of nights. It kept coming out the same, and I would like to tell you, I argued with it. But mostly, I just sat there until the windows fogged. The dock scanner at that distribution center jammed twice a shift, and one night I fixed it, and I did not tell anybody. And I did it again the next week. I could not stop being a person who fixes things. That is the only reason I opened the email. It came in March from Mina Adeyemi, who had done quality testing on my team and who was the only human being from that building who ever wrote to me. Said, I am probably not supposed to send you this. And then a link. Cadence Dispatch, a new company, freshly out of stealth, 11 employees, a founder photograph in a nice gray sweater. Curtis Bell. Amy, smiling with both hands in his pockets, quoted about how the freight industry had been waiting for something built by somebody who had actually stood on a dock. I watched it in my sister's basement at 1 a.m. with the sound off because Ren was asleep upstairs. 40 seconds in, the demo hovered over a column header and a tooltip came up. It said rekeyed, R before E, the way I had typed it at 2 a.m. 3 years earlier, laughing to myself, in a kitchen that was not even in that state anymore. I sat there a long time with my hand over my mouth. Then I got up, very calmly, and I made a pot of coffee at 1:15 in the morning, like a man with somewhere to be. Because a typo is not proof. A typo is a coincidence. A good lawyer eats for breakfast. I needed the 6 lines nobody knew about. Cadence had a free trial, 14 days, credit card required. I signed up as Nathan Boyce, Help Desk, Dental Group, and I want you to appreciate that the name they drove me into was the name I walked back in with. I opened a screen recorder first because I had learned something about how the story gets written. I filmed the version number. Then I put the cursor in the search box and I typed my daughter's name. The program thought about it for a second. Then it came back and it said, Ren says try again. I did not celebrate. I sat in a folding chair in a basement and I shook for about a minute and a half. And then I went and got the shoebox. A certificate from the Copyright Office with a registration number on it, filed 6 years before, describing a computer program called Switchback, with a full copy of the source code on deposit in Washington, $45. I sat on the basement steps with that envelope in my hands, and I said his name out loud in an empty room. I paid the Copyright Office for a certified copy of what I had deposited. The actual code, the way it existed 6 years earlier, stamped and sealed by the government, and it took 9 weeks to arrive. The lawyer was the 11th one I called. The first 10 heard the words county jail and stopped hearing anything else. Priyoragu Nathan had a 2-room office over an insurance agency and a coffee maker older than my marriage, and she read for 40 minutes without saying a word. She asked whether I registered it before he took it, or after. Before, I said. 6 years before. And she put both hands flat on that table and said, then we do not need his permission for anything. Because I had registered it first. She could ask a federal court for damages set by statute and for my legal fees, which is the only reason a woman with a 2-room office can afford to take a case from a man sleeping in a basement. She took it on contingency that afternoon. She said, they are not going to argue they did not copy it. They cannot, she said. They are going to argue it was never yours, that Halver Sen owned it the second you badged in, and that me simply took his employer's product with him. And I said, but that would mean he stole it from Halver Sen. And she smiled at her coffee cup and said, yes. And that is when we stopped being the ones getting hit. Here is what we did, and I want you to see it before he did. Priya told me not to file yet. She told me that a man who is about to close a funding round will say things in writing that he would never say in a courtroom, and that we should give him a completely safe place to say them. So I wrote to Curtis Bell, me, not angry, broke. I told him the truth, which is that I was working nights on a dock, that my kid was sleeping in my sister's basement, and I asked if there was any contract work at his new company, part-time, anything, because I knew the product better than anyone he could hire. I read that email 11 times before I sent it, and every time I felt something go out of me. He answered in 2 hours. 2 hours for a man who had not answered me in 14 months. He said he had always liked me personally. Then he said, and I am reading this to you word for word, because I have read it 400 times. You have no claim to any of it. That code belonged to Halvar Sen II you badged in, and I have the paperwork to prove it. So let us both be adults about this. Let us both be adults about this. I printed it at a public library, and I drove it to Priyu's office with the windows down. Because he had just done, in writing, on his own company's mail server, the exact thing she said he would do. His entire startup, 11 employees, a term sheet, a nice gray sweater, was built on a product he had just sworn in writing belonged to somebody else. He thought he was closing a door on me. He was signing something. We filed in federal court in June. A process server handed it to him in the lobby of his own building, in front of the front desk, which Priya told me later was not necessary, and which I have never once regretted. Then she did the thing that turned it from a lawsuit into a demolition. She sent a subpoena to Halvar Sen Logistics, not to Bell up me, to my old employer, the company that had me arrested, asking for one thing, my complete personnel file. 'Cause if Bell me was going to stand on the claim that Halvar Sen owned my work, then Halvar Sen was about to find out that their former vice president had walked out the door with a product that ran 240 of their trucks. The men who put me in a cell were about to become the most motivated people on earth. The file came back in August. Priya called me at the dock at 2 in the morning, and I stood between 2 trailers with the phone against my ear. She said, "Nate, page 11 is there." And Exhibit A, the page where I had written the word switchback in ballpoint, was in that file, and it was blank. Not missing, blank. A clean form, unsigned, sitting exactly where mine should have been. And behind it, a 2-page memorandum from their internal investigation, dated the week I was walked out, saying that I had admitted in an exit interview to taking company code for personal use. I never had an exit interview. I sat in a room with an outside lawyer for 9 minutes, and then a man carried my mug to the parking lot in a bin. My own signed copy was in the boxes. Boxes had been in my sister's basement, along the far wall, under a window well that took 11 inches of water in February, and she had asked me twice if I wanted to go through them, and I had said no because I could not stand to. They went out to the curb in March, and I want to be honest about that night, because it is the only time I really quit. I sat on the folding steps and told June that a company can just print a different page, and there is nothing under the sun that stops them, and she should take Ren to her mother's for a while. She was scrolling on her phone, and I remember being angry at her for scrolling. Then she turned it around and held it up in front of my face. 3 years and 4 months back in her messages, at 8:51 in the morning on my first day at Halvar Sen, a photograph, page 11, an Exhibit A on a conference room table, my handwriting on the line, the word switchback in ballpoint, the date beside it, and under it, her 4 words. Look at you, Kovalchik. June has never deleted a message in her life, and I had made fun of her for it for 11 years. Priya did something with that photograph that I did not understand until it happened. She did nothing. She did not correct their file. She did not warn them. She did not amend a single filing. She let Curtis Bell, me, walk into a deposition with a copy of that blank page in his hand, believing it was the strongest thing in the room. October the 9th, a conference room on the 14th floor, a videographer in the corner with a camera on a tripod. Bell, me in the gray sweater, his lawyer, his co-founder, a woman named Ani Kusoren's son, who had put her savings into that company. a lawyer for the fund that was 3 weeks from wiring him $9 million. And at the far end, because Halvar Sen had come into the case as a party by then, their general counsel, a quiet man named Dale Marquette, with a legal pad and nothing written on it yet. I sat at the end of the table in a suit that did not fit, because I was the plaintiff and nobody could make me leave. He did not look at me for the first hour. Priya was gentle with him. That was the worst part for him, I think, how gentle she was. She let him explain how the industry works. She let him say the word self-taught dispatcher twice. Then she slid the blank Exhibit A across the table and asked him to confirm, under oath, that this was the complete and accurate first-day file and that I had listed nothing as my own. He said yes. He said it a little impatiently, the way you agree with something obvious. Then she asked him to read his own all-hands email out loud. He read the whole thing in that same warm voice he used on the floor. An isolated integrity incident involving a member of the engineering team. And Priya asked him to read the last line again, slower. And he did, and the camera got all of it. Then she put the photograph on the table. At 8:51 in the morning, 3 years and 4 months earlier, page 11, and Exhibit A, my handwriting, the word switchback, the date beside it. And she said the phone it came from belonged to my wife, that the file had never left it, and that my wife was on her witness list for Thursday. Nobody said anything for about 4 seconds. His lawyer asked for a break. Priya said she had 2 more. She read his email back to him. That code belonged to Halvar Sen the second you badged in, and I have the paperwork to prove it. And she asked him one small question. She asked whether K. Dent's Dispatch had a license from Halvar Sen for any of it. That was when Dale Marquette finally picked up his pen. Bellamy looked at his co-founder. Soren's son closed her laptop and put it in her bag and walked out of that room while the camera was still rolling and the door did not slam, it just clicked. Then Priya did the last thing. She opened his own live product on a laptop, turned it so the camera could see the screen, and typed my daughter's name into the search box. 6 lines of code from a kitchen table in another state. Ren says, try again. He put his hand flat on the table like the floor had tilted. His lawyer said the words off the record, and Priya said no. And the videographer kept filming, because that is not how off the record works. The video was played in open court in December at a hearing about the blank page and the memo about an exit interview that never happened. The judge used the word fabricated twice and referred it to the United States Attorney. 2 reporters were in the gallery. The same trade site that had run my arrest ran my name again, and this time the headline had his in it. The fund pulled the term sheet in 9 days. K. Dent's Dispatch removed its founder by written consent. 11 days after that, the way you unscrew a fixture, and what was left of it was sold in pieces by Spring. Halvar Sen sued him too, for everything he took while he was still cashing their checks. He is under indictment now for perjury and obstruction. And his own deposition video is the exhibit, and he is the one paying a lawyer by the hour. My case ended in a consent judgment I am not allowed to describe, except to say that the number was set by statute, and that they paid my legal fees, and that June bought a car she picked out herself. The arrest was expunged in the fall. It took an order from a judge and 11 months, and it is gone. Halvar Sen licenses switchback from me now. I own it, they rent it, and the check comes on the 15th, which means once a quarter I walk into that building as a vendor, and I sign the visitor log, and the man at the security desk holds the door for me and calls me Mr. Kovalchik, and Ruben still cannot look at me for very long, and I have decided that is his to carry and not mine, and is 9. She sat at my desk last month, on my laptop, on the company system, and typed her own name into the search box of a program that is going to pay for her college. She said, "Dad, it still does it." I said, "Yeah, It never stopped doing it. There is a man on a loading dock off the county line who still calls me Nathan, and I still turn around every single time, and I do not think I am ever going to fix that. Here is what I would tell you if you were sitting across from me instead of driving somewhere with this in your ear. The work does not speak for itself. The work says whatever the man holding the microphone says it says, and if he is your boss and he fired you, he is holding the only microphone in the room. So put your name on it, on paper with a date, before you ever need it, even if it costs you $45 and feels ridiculous. Now I want to ask you something, and I mean it. If your boss told you that the thing you built on your own time was yours, would you get that in writing, or would you trust him the way I trusted mine? Tell me down in the comments, because I read them. And if you want to sit with one more of these, subscribe and stay a while. I have got another one that starts with a man who thought nobody was writing anything down.